I'm Jack Hinkle.
And I'm Steve Peterson. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Oh, wait.
Oh, okay.
Hey, it is now December 11th. We are only 2 quick weeks away from the holiday of Christmas.
Are they quick, though?
They're the longest, 2 weeks of the school year. But it is the post-Christmas Spectacular Day. Wait, are we still being recorded on the video, too?
You want me to check? It's going.
Okay, good.
He trusts me.
Okay, so just want to make sure I look good. And then we just had our 4 performances of Christmas Spec, of cast of over 500 students at Concord High School.
Just enough.
And we got off that we're done with that on Sunday. Went really well. It was a good time. Attended. We had sellout shows. It was a great time. Kids did a wonderful job. And now we're back at Concord High School. We have a week of class and then a week of finals, and we go home for 2 weeks.
That sounds good.
Right?
It sounds good.
This is good.
I feel kind of like we're sportscasters this week because we got the iPad right here.
I know, this is exciting.
Or like we're weathermen.
This is exciting.
We'd be bad at both of those things.
Well, Jack, today is another day that we bring in a guest. This is a first-time guest.
Love guest days. First-time guest. Please welcome to Chops Podcast, Denton Sutherlin.
Yeah! Yeah!
Coming live from Denton, Texas, right?
Yeah, I live in Louisville, but go to school in Denton, I guess. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Louisville,
close enough.
Denton. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I know Denton from somewhere before, and it's probably not from Indiana. It's from his YouTube channel. Right?
Oh, my goodness.
It's from Denton Outdoors.
Denton Outdoors. Like and subscribe, folks.
Denton Outdoors.
Yeah, sure. Go
YouTube.
like and subscribe.
Denton is a nature enthusiast. And a lover of the trails, and he put some wonderful guided trails on there, and so you have to check it out. I'm sure we'll get into that. So Denton, is coming to us from Texas, but our connection with Denton goes back a number of years, and Denton was the percussion instructor here for the Concord Community Schools for 3 years, and we got some wonderful things done with Denton. We became good friends and really enjoyed talking about teaching and best practices. And then Denton took his life in a different direction and went to the University of North Texas in Texas, obviously, North Texas, and is studying there. So, Denton, can you, first of all, we're really glad to see you because it's just great to see you, man. It's like
he's definitely.
Bro
Good
time
to
right
see
now.
you guys too. Yeah.
This is awesome.
I've always wanted to be on a podcast.
Oh my gosh! Well, this is going to be one for the ages. Here. This is.
Oh yeah.
So it's fun because we used to work together and we had some really good times. We had some really fun times.
We did.
So Denton, why don't we get Chops Nation, all 2 of them.
Yeah, right.
No,
I'm one of those too.
And Jack's dad is the other one.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's go back a few years to young Denton. Maybe just a little bit about you, where you're from, where you're raised, and getting into your music experience, and how you kind of got interested in percussion, and how you got interested in teaching.
Yeah, sure. Well, long time ago when I was young, I got a drum set for Christmas, and my dad played drums, and that's really like what got me started into it. So, growing up on the goat farm, I'd go feed goats and go bang on the drums,
Wait,
So,
Back it up.
Because
we know about this.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Okay, say that again. What kind of farm?
Goat farm. Grew up on a goat farm.
Goat farm. And this was in central Indiana?
Yeah, central Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis, not too far.
So, Denton does have a history raising goats.
Yeah, raising goats, and it was fun. It was a good time. So, goats are awesome, but raised goats and hit drums, got a drum set for Christmas.
Goats and hit drums.
How'd the goats feel about the drum set?
No, man. I don't know. They were just kind of like whatever. They didn't care about a whole lot of much.
I believe that.
Oh man.
Okay,
yeah.
so you got a drum set.
Yes.
And then you attended high school at you ended up at Lawrence Central, right?
Yes.
But you started at
Mount
Vernon.
Yeah.
And you and I had a person we both ran into, Nathan Fellerman, right? Like I went to college with him, but he was one of your your teachers, right, growing up.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like huge mentor. Honestly, wow, this kind of takes me back. I'm so glad you brought up that name, because Nathan went to Butler, obviously, your connection with him, but he was in high school at Mount Vernon when I was in like intermediate school. So like when I was in like 5th and 6th grade, he was like the person I looked up to, and still look up to this day. And now he's an elementary music teacher in the Franklin school district. But yeah, gosh, like what an amazing person.
So you went to school?
Yeah, so he was a senior when I was a freshman, and I remember we played the Jester something. It's a piece by the IU band director. Okay. It was like one of the first pieces we played, and he played marimba on that tune. And I've never seen anyone play the marimba that fast. Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they make music for that? Like, because that was my first time I played in like college wind ensemble, and I was like, oh my gosh, this dude is legit. So he was, he was a really impressive percussionist and a really good teacher.
Yes, yeah. And he taught me lessons for a little bit when I was really young, and like those were some very like formative years in my life as like a musician. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, so from then Mount Vernon, then you went to Lawrence Central High School, and that was mainly a move to pursue a different level of musical excellence, right?
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to do music, and like it was just such a big part of like everything I did and what I loved. And like growing up so close to Indianapolis, there were just so many great music, like high schools with great music programs. So I talked my parents into letting me transfer, and everybody was kind of like, "What are you doing? Like, what the heck?" But like, I really think to this day that was probably the best decision I've ever made. I made some just unbelievable friendships, and a lot of my friendships I made there. You know, I'm like, we have a group chat, and you know, every week there's people commenting and talking in it, and just like the experience I got, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but like the experiences that I got from being a part of a program like that were just like next level, really honestly quite undescribable.
Ken, what was the program like there at Lawrence Central? What was going on there at the time? What was the vibe? What was the level of performance going on?
For sure. It was a big BOA school, as is like a lot of the indie schools, but also in a very different realm. It was like extremely concert band focused. Like that was the bread and butter of the entire program, was like the concert stuff. Which I think can sometimes be a little bit different with some of the schools that are just so big about about marching band, right? Yeah. But really the concert program at Lawrence like pushed everything. Really great wind ensemble, like got to work with like some amazing teachers. Mr. James and Mr. Greenwell were like huge mentors, and just like fantastic educators, and just like some of the smartest musicians, you know, I've ever met, and best teachers I've had. So yeah.
And then from there, you went to the IU School of Music.
Yep, and went to IU.
Majored in percussion and education?
Yeah, well, just music education.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, but you played a lot, right? I mean,
oh, definitely. I played a ton. Played so much. But yeah, was at IU for 4 years and did that whole thing, and it was a lot. it was a lot, but I mean, that was like another just like unbelievable experience with just like that's where, I mean, like music I've never experienced on like a totally different level, with things like orchestra and opera, and just like having some of the like best percussion teachers and best band directors there are in the world. Sure. So yeah, definitely.
And then sprinkled in there was a stint with the Mandarins Drum and Bugle Corps and the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps. And did you do 1 year with each?
Yeah, just 1 year with each. After 2 years of drum corps is kind of a lot. I was like, I'm gonna go do something different.
I'm gonna go teach now.
I'm gonna go walk in the woods.
Yeah, in the woods.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna. Yeah, drum corps is a fun activity, but man, it is a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yep.
So yeah.
And then after that, you started your first job at Concord as the percussion director, and I remember going to a local hacienda Mexican eatery with you, like in the summer, like getting to know you and meeting and talking about what that year would look like. And for those of you listening, Denton entered the teaching profession at the very worst year possible, which was the
fall of 2019.
Yes.
Yeah, fall of 19. Oof, man.
So the fall of 2019, or the summer, Denton did a percussion camp for a few weeks. And the night before we were supposed to start full band camp, before Denton had the first, time to be engaged with the entire marching band, 12 hours before it was supposed to happen, a construction project at Concord High School kind of went awry with a bad rainstorm, and it flooded our music department. And I mean, flood, like bad. It was like up to 7 rows in the auditorium, and the pit covers were floating all over the place. And so basically the band came in and the music department was not usable, and it wasn't usable for months. And it became full of electric cords and pumps and fans and blowers and emergency lights, and we kind of had to relocate. And that was Denton's first glimpse into that, right?
Yes. And then we were like, don't worry, Denton. The rest of the 2019-2020 school year will be smooth.
Yeah.
Nothing else bad will happen,
Yeah.
Denton.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Denton's first year is when the pandemic came around, and then so that shut the school down. And then his second season of marching band was the COVID band, right? And he did make it for a somewhat normal year, the third year, but
I did kind of. I think it also needs to go to say COVID shut down the percussion ensemble concert literally the day of.
That was
like,
a
we were
fateful
in
day.
school.
We were
in school that Friday, and then like we were gonna have our percussion concert, and then it was like, oh nope.
You could see the dominoes falling. I remember that. It was Friday the 13th, right? March 13th.
And
we had just finished an orchestra concert the night before, and you guys had did your dress rehearsal. You were all pumped up, and by that time, COVID was like an hour by hour thing. Like you're still getting updates throughout the day, and I just remember you're like, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and then all after school activities will be canceled until further notice.
Yeah, in the morning we got that memo, and then we didn't see each other for 3 months. So then Denton finished up his time as third year at Concord, and then went away to Texas. And so we wanted to have you on, Denton, because we have valued your friendship, even though from afar, and it's not been as frequent, our exchanges. But, we definitely had some connections when you were here at Concord, and really found you to be a person that was really interested in, you were truly interested in the educational process, and you were a man, I'm sure you still are, but of minimal words but high impact.
Yes,
right?
sure. That's a good way to describe it.
Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. You could say that.
Well,
I feel like I can't say that, but
no. So we'll say it for you, and I think that's a refreshing take. And there were, it was for me, it was a really enjoyable approach, probably because it was different from me, and I really enjoyed that seeing happen, especially in a younger teacher, and seeing how the students did respond to that. And so that was like really enjoyable. So, and then also I think, over your years here too, that there was some strong bonds you had created in a professional way with students, and just, I think people really appreciated your, authentic self.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
those were, that was two pretty great things to jump in on as a young teacher. And so,
well, and I would add too, like I was excited to get you on here because, Steve and I have talked about what we call the teaching trifecta of knowing your students, knowing your teaching, knowing your content. You are an epitome of those three things. Like you get very excited about music and like contemporary music. And I remember you had to, like your first year before you got here, you were like at new music camps, right, for percussion music, and you were like digging into that stuff, and you get here and you're like super excited to meet the kids, and you had your little fittings and fellowship when they got their carriers tried on and everything, and you love talking shop with us about how to be efficient in what we're doing. So I do want to clear the runway for you and just like talk to us about some of like what you found like your best practices in teaching, like whether that's like in a private lesson or a percussion sectional. And I mean, obviously you've taught band and you've kind of taught many facets of music. So maybe talk a little bit about like just what you think about in terms of teaching and how you approach your craft.
Yeah, for sure. I think this won't be into any surprise of you guys, but there's like a few things that like I just always have to be focused on. And then the first one is, authentic connections with the students. I like kids are smart, man. They can see when you're fake. Like it's so easy, like they know when you're being fake. And it's really important to be like really honest and upfront and authentic, whether that's in like a positive avenue or like whether you have to like take care of discipline problems, but it's all got to be really authentic. And then I am a fan of simplicity. And I think the simplest structures in a classroom usually lead to the most effective outcomes. And
the simplest structures in the classroom leads to the best outcomes. Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't think things need to be complicated. And I think there always needs to be like, you always need to be questioning what you're doing and reinventing things. Like if something's not working, but if something works, do it. And like, try not to make things muddier and more unclear than they need to be for everybody involved.
I think that's a wrap.
Well, it's so interesting. I mean, clearly you're talking about authenticity and like how you teach and like you live your life the way you teach. I mean,
sure, yeah.
You're talking about like simplicity and like your beautiful Saturday is going to a mountain and walking for 10 miles, right?
Yeah.
And I remember having those conversations with you getting back on Monday. I was like, "What'd you do?" You're like, I was like, "Okay, you went for a hike." And I was like, "Okay, what'd you listen to while you hiked?" And you're like, "What? Listen." I just think. And I was like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what you do. Like you're very much like in the moment with your kids. Yeah, present. And you're talking about your authenticity with your kids. And I think that's like one of your gifts. And I don't want to say gift as it's underwritten. Like it's also a skill that you're like
developed.
That you're very present with your students. And that was something that we noticed as your coworkers, and I'm sure your kids noticed too. And why that things worked
definitely.
Well. So you're talking about like simplicity in the classroom, and I think Steve and I both kind of looked at each other when you said that one because we're like,
that sounds good. That sounds great. Yeah.
And I wish we could do like a quick lab of like Denton just teaching a quick like 4-measure thing because I just want to hear like I want people to hear Denton speak when he teaches.
Yes, and there's a clarity and a simplicity, and then a directness, and I think that's a pretty honorable trait to be able to live your life like, and just be direct like that. And the thing that I think that's important is that they go back to what you said is that students are smart.
Yes.
Students are smart, and they're different. All students are different, but students are very good at picking up on the authenticity. And like you said, kind of sniffing that one out or smelling that one out. And so I think we've talked about this before, but you can be like a high energy, boisterous, stern person. You could be Mr. Jokey, Mr. Pun every minute. You could be very soft spoken and heartfelt. You could be very direct and minimal and just cut to the chase. And as long as that's authentic to the teacher, that works.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of students are, we're all adaptable enough. Humans are adaptable that they can latch onto that. So it's not like you have to be the clown to attract students to your craft or to your teaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be the professor. You don't have to be like super analytical and just be like, overthink everything. You can just be pedestrian at time and just progress with them.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Did you ever think, this is kind of interesting question to think about with you because you've taught 3 years in a classroom and I know that you're itching to get back into it, but did you have, and I know that you you worked with other drum lines in the area and percussion sections. Did you ever kind of have an identity crisis, like when you were teaching, because like you felt you were supposed to be something else? Like you reflected back to Mr. James or Mr. Greenwell or Mr. Yoder, some of your teachers or some of your drum corps staff people, or did you just kind of have that gift like, I am Denton, you know?
I know that's something that a lot of young teachers go through, is the kind of like identity crisis kind of thing. And I don't ever feel like I went through that kind of phase of like not knowing like who I am as a teacher. I always felt like I always knew very much where I was as a teacher. And I never felt like I was trying to not be myself. But what I did feel a lot as a young teacher was like I could see the areas like I always needed to improve. Or like if I did something poor, I was like, oh man, like I know I need to do that better. It's a little bit hard to explain. It's kind of like that the idea that you don't know what you don't know. And like that's, I feel like, how I would more describe myself in the first few years of teaching than more of like an identity crisis. It was more like a learning what I don't know kind of thing.
Well, that's like a gift, and that's a gift, like not only into the classroom, but just a gift to be able to be yourself and to be comfortable in that, because I think that's where a lot of anxiety and with humans of all ages, like anxiety comes from what is not there, but they think should be there.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And it's kind of like this clash that happens. And you kind of have this gift, but maybe also something that you've worked on, you've crafted to be Denton. And that's like an awesome thing. I hope that there's like younger teachers that are listening and saying that's possible. Like, but that also kind of has to do with maybe who you are as a person and like how you were raised and kind of like your self-worth.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think that also part of that comes down to like the idea of not overthinking it. Like in the beginning, I think a lot of, I speak like I'm like older than I am, but like, I'm still a young teacher learning all of these things, but I feel like a lot of times first year teachers, like they overthink what it is that they're doing, but really like what it is that they're doing is what they've been doing since 6th grade. You know what I mean? So it's like they've been in the process of that, of like playing music, experiencing music. And it's just kind of like you're on the other side of it. And that's kind of how I see it. I don't really see it as that much different from being the student to being the teacher. It's a very similar relationship and a very similar place to be. And maybe that's even why I felt comfortable in my first few years of teaching, because I felt maybe more like I was learning with the students than I was the one teaching the students, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. For sure.
Something I always thought that you deserve to get credit for, like something I liked about your teaching, was how calm you are. Like every class you taught, you're the same Mr. Sutherlin. And and it doesn't matter if the kids are totally cooking and they're like on fire with what they're playing, or if they're all being jerks. You're the same Mr. Sutherlin. I think I told you this before, but I think the only thing that changes is like you start to enunciate more when the more direct you get.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, your temperature, like your emotional temperature in your classes, are always very calm. And I think that helped the kids be, feel pretty, I don't want to say safe, like that's too trivial, but like they can be productive because you're predictable.
Sure.
So I want to give you credit for that. Another thing I'm curious about hearing you talk about is that like you always had a system. And like your systems are incredible. And I think that's something that like you're, again, skilled at, and that your organization is pretty incredible. And for our listeners that don't really know what the job is like, Denton when he was a percussion director, our current percussion director, same gig, they're in charge of 7 different ensembles, plus their own percussion ensemble, plus whatever extra stuff is happening. I mean, there are just so many moving pieces. And when I teach my kids, they all play trumpet or they all play French horn during marching band,
Right.
And Denton's kids play marimba or rack or xylophone or bass drum or timpani or right. I mean, it just goes on and on. So you're keeping track of so much equipment and all these kids, and you're teaching them how to carry it and care for it and play it all at the same time. How did you learn to be so like systemic and organized? Like, how did you develop that, or was it always there?
Man, that's a good question. I think a lot of that. I think a lot of the way. I think that is just kind of in my personality to have that kind of systematic, kind of like just the way things go. But I think the way I learned to make music, like really systematic for students in a productive and positive way, comes from my high school experience at like Lawrence, and maybe even like partly my drum corps experience, and just like experiencing like what it takes to have really high level music. And then just like I said, making that as simple as possible for students to like follow the path of.
So what does that look like if I'm in a rehearsal with Mr. Sutherlin? Like, how do you simplify the intensity?
Sure. Yeah, no, I see what, I know what you mean. So like, I think, okay, let's just like talk about like the first things that you like, I would do if I were like taking over a program of percussionists. Like the first thing is like, we've got to learn how to like take care of the gear. You know what I mean? So we've got to learn how to like store it, how to carry it, how to move it. So like I always had like posters and signs in the rooms of like where things go, you know, and it's like there was never a question as to where it goes. Look at the sign. It tells you where it belongs. You know what I mean? And then like you just start to get these like processes going, and then they just like feed on themselves. And then the students are like policing that process, you know? So it's like after you get the ball going, it's like your seniors can be like, oh no, this belongs in this spot. And then it always gets put back in that spot because they know it belongs in that spot. So that's kind of like how things like maybe evolved in gear, like how I use systems there. But also like from a more like thinking about the content, it is difficult to teach like 35 percussionists in a marching band when they're all doing different things. So I wrote out all my exercises to go with both the drumline and the front ensemble so they could be played together. And all those exercises were extremely targeted towards one like fundamental thing. So like, and it was for all the like instrument wide, right? Like marimba is different than snare drum, but they both got to know how to play with a legato stroke. So I would write the exercise for the drumline and the front ensemble to where they'd both be working on the same skill set at the same time. And then that allowed me to speak to everyone at the same time about the same technique. And then when we got to show music, where everybody was doing different things at different times, I was able to refer back to exercises with different sections. And everybody kind of understood what they were doing because we had broken it down and made it really simple and focused on one thing.
So one thing better.
Yes.
One thing better.
One thing better.
Yes.
And you're teaching more from the fundamentals, less than you are from the actual music. Sure.
Yeah, 100%. I think like, especially with a group, when you're dealing with a large group, you know, it's like if you can have good fundamentals, the music takes care of itself most of the time. And then you don't have to worry about it as much. So, you know, like I would teach my kids how to play good, you know, full strokes, downstrokes, taps and upstrokes, and how to play double stroke rolls. And then if they were good at those things, they could play the show music pretty easily.
Gotcha. So that's attacking or approaching music in a very objective process, right? Like putting your I like to use like Lego bricks, you know, like you're giving them Legos and then you put those Legos together. And, you know, watching a drumline rehearse, like especially a battery, watching them rehearse, maybe if it's a high school group or a college or a corps, there's a certain amount of repetition that goes on that's like automated, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And it's kind of hypnotic, right? Yeah. Like you kind of get into, if you've never seen a upper level drumline rehearse, but like they'll go for minutes playing the same exercise with like 8 counts of rest, tapping off with a person in the middle playing notes in the middle, and then they play the exercise again, and they play it again and again and again, and then they stop at the right time. And so it's music excellence through an objective lens. And I know that was something that you're aware of, and you're available to look at music as the X and O's. And then maybe you can expand upon then how do you get from the X and O's excellence to making music?
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad you asked that, because
Thank you.
What you just said. What you just said. Like, I feel like the process, like what I just explained, like is simple, but it's also like it's so important that the students understand what that process is. You know, like they've got to understand that when they play something again and again, like we're either like focused on a specific technique, or like we're focused on like the mental aspect of it, and like it's really important that they understand what's going on, because if they don't understand what's going on, they can't apply it to the music. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Like that's how the application comes, right? Like if you do these things and they're very mindless for the students, like then the application doesn't transfer. So like I have to be like very conscious about the things I say and the things I want students to listen for and the things I want students to think about in an exercise, because then they can think about the same things in the show music.
Gotcha. They just get to apply those.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's really just applying them, and the skills are no different, right? It's just a different order of process, but the skills are all the same.
It's like you're teaching the kids how to learn.
Yeah. 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 Basically. Yeah.
I mean, I think this goes back to this whole thing with the systems, though. It's like, you know, you mentioned a couple of like percussion rudiments, but other than those, you haven't talked notes or rhythm. You're just saying,
right.
It starts with gear, and once we figure out how to do that, we start playing, and we start with like the very, very basic stuff. And if we keep doing the basic stuff, they can play.
Yes.
And you're like talking about how you need to teach them how to listen, how to think, and how to apply. And any teacher listening to this is going through the same stuff. They're trying to teach them. I mean, it's so interesting. I know this is like, we say this isn't really a music podcast, and while we do talk about music a lot, it's really not that different than all the other curriculum. I mean, it's just a different kind of thing.
So going back to that, so what if you had like a student that was like a high school student that was pretty advanced on marimba, and they wanted to audition to go to North Texas or IU or somewhere and be in performance. So what about the I'm kind of reframing my question, but when you're working with a student that's like high level X's and O's,
sure,
what is it like musically though, or like emotionally, that you can help the students experience so they don't sound so automated? Because I've seen you perform as a drum set player, as a marimba player, as a multi-percussionist, and you're very musical. And for the non-music people, what I mean is like not just playing the notes and rhythms, but having like an emotional, like present feeling into the music, in a sense of phrasing, and a sense of, you know, delicateness or forcefulness. Like, so does that follow the same kind of process? Like, how do you teach someone to be musical? I mean, I'm asking for a friend.
I think you just pointed at me.
I'm pointing at me.
You pointed at me.
Because I think because it's like a different part of the brain.
It is.
But you can't be musical until you're technically correct.
Yeah.
But then you've been a part of some ensembles where you've crossed that threshold where the technical excellence was there, but then there were like these musical moments. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is a tougher question to answer. But I think that this is why, I think this is why students have enjoyed the way I teach, is because it's very, like, the processes of getting from the beginning to the end of something is quite simple. It's not complicated. Like, to play anything is really quite simple. Like, it's really simple to play anything. But then it's like you put the like emotional or the musical factor on top of that, and then that becomes more like personal. And then I think like my authentic self, I don't even know that I could put it into words, but for some reason, like my authentic self, when I like to speak to students, or when they speak to me, or when we discuss things like musical concepts, or how we might want to phrase something, or even how we feel about something, like that becomes like the human aspect of it. And like in the human aspect is what adds that little sparkle. And, you know, it's really, really hard to explain. It's really hard to teach, but it's quite easy to experience it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't take a whole lot to experience that with other people. And I think that the more students experience that, the more they're able to apply that to what they're doing, you know? So I think it comes down to experiencing that kind of like togetherness, and that human element of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I remember you talked, you know, you had mentioned your high school directors before, but you had an exceptional high school experience sitting in the wind ensemble where there was excellence in facility of getting around technically on the instruments, but then there was like this really beautiful sense of natural or musicality that the teachers enabled the students to enact.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it is, and I think a lot of that comes from like just creating an experience for the student. And I think that's where that comes from, you know, like that musicality and like that next level. It comes from the experience. It really doesn't come from the notes or the rhythms or the phrasing that you put into something. It's the lived experience together, kind of, at least from my experience. I even like, I tell my students now, you know, I'm more aware of these things now. I don't think I was as aware of these things. I might have been doing these as a young teacher, but I feel like I'm more aware of them. But I teach the steel band at UNT, and every semester, I mean, gosh, that ensemble's a blast. It's literally just like jamming on steel pans for an hour, you know, and then we like go home and then come back and jam on steel pans for an hour. It's awesome. But I always like tell my students at the beginning of the semester that like my goal is not for you to learn how to play the steel pan. My goal is for you to have an experience in this ensemble like you were in Trinidad. You know what I mean? To experience what it's like to be in a steel pan ensemble, not to just learn how to play the steel pan. And I think that that's what makes the classroom special and meaningful, and gives it that kind of like little flair and adds to the musicality, like you're saying.
There you go. Wow. So you're still doing the steel pan now?
Yeah, this was actually my last semester of it. Next semester, I'll teach one of the percussion ensembles, so that'd be kind of fun.
Dang. Okay, everyone sign up. UNT, Percussion Ensemble.
I know, right?
Professor Sutherlin. Dang. Well, okay, we've talked a lot of teaching, and you know, it's very clear you love your content. You're getting all jazzed up about teaching steel pan. Like
which are basically like
Little Mermaid, right?
But they're basically like trash cans that have been bent.
Yeah.
They're bent.
They're trash cans.
Yeah, they're like tragic trash cans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're jamming and like playing this beautiful music, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm curious. Like, I know you and I have talked, and like you're thinking like maybe middle school, like middle school band director is like next stop for Mr. Sutherlin after graduation. Like when
100%.
He's getting all jacked up right now thinking about it. He's excited. Yeah.
Yes.
So like you're thinking about middle school, and you know. I'm sure there are some jaded middle school teachers out there being like, "Oh my gosh, these 13-year-olds are just tragic." But like, you're really excited to like build some relationships with 6th, 7th, 8th graders. When you're like thinking of getting that job and you're like meeting those kids for the first day, I kind of know the vibe of Mr. Sutherlin building relationships, but for our listeners, like, what does that look like when Mr. Sutherlin talks to a kid?
Yeah, sure. Well, okay. This is like the most important thing. And I got this.
Listen up, folks. Listen up.
Are we still recording this? Because this is the most important. This isn't going to be on the reel. Okay, go ahead, Denton.
Use people's names every single time and use them a lot.
Denton!
Yes.
Use people's names.
Like, yes, you have to know everybody's names, and you have to use their names a lot. Like, that's what creates the connection and the meaning between your conversation, you know? Like if I was just like talking to Steve and I didn't mention your name and I was like, hey, how's your day? But then if I say, hey, how's your day, Steve? Like it kind of adds a different level of like meaning to that, you know?
Yeah.
And like and it's the same with teaching, you know, like you've got to use students' names, you've got to know students' names, and it's just really important for the connection between the teacher and the student to be authentic. So that's like rule number one for me. It's like names have got to be the first thing I do. Like names is above any content possible, you know, like names has to come first.
Names come before any content.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's okay. Yeah. That's good. Okay. So once you got talking to the kids' name, I mean, like what's your jam in like getting to know kids? Like what you got their names, you're talking to them, but like what does it look like before class, during class, after class, when you randomly run into a kid at Target? Like how does that go?
For sure. Yeah. Well, okay. This is something I got from I didn't even mention Sam Fritz and Josh Torres were my cooperating teachers at Center Grove when I student taught. And man, like I learned so much from those two. And one of the things I learned from Sam Fritz, who was the middle school band director at one of the Center Grove middle schools, was he gave kids a fist bump every day when they walked in the room. And like I tried to do that as much as possible every single day when I could. I just like give kids fist bumps every single day when they walk in the room. And that just kind of like shows the student that like you're there, you know what I mean? And that's like a really important thing, that like I'm not busy, like I'm there for them, you know? And that like just starts off everything really great. And then I think about this so much, Steve. I think about this so much. When my first year, like during band camp, you were talking about, I'm going to try to like have a conversation with every one of my students every day. Boom. And then I was like, I like that blew my mind in the moment. I was like, whoa, man, like that's such a good idea. And like, I had never really thought of how like difficult that actually is. And it takes time, and you have to be diligent, and you have to do it really purposefully to get to everybody. Yeah. And it's not an easy thing. But every time I'm in the classroom, I literally I think about that every single time.
Great.
So,
we've talked about it too. It does take time.
Yeah,
it does, and it will shave off time off of your rehearsal. But we've talked about this before, saying, it's you don't have time not to do that.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Like you gotta, you can make it 3 minutes. You can shave 3 minutes off of working on a piece of music if that's what it is.
Yes, and
for sure.
And I will say too, like Denton won't say this about himself, but every interaction a kid has with Denton is it is a positive one.
Yes.
I mean, you're thinking about like how you interact with kids, and some teachers may think that like the personal relationship stuff only happens before or after class and not during class. Mm-hmm. But like anytime you're speaking to a kid, that kid is like making judgments on you as the teacher. Like, do I like you? Do I not like you? And and Denton obviously is like very intentional about the before and after of class. And I've seen that, like I've been witness to that, but he's also intentional during class, even in a social way. Like you're talking about saying the kids' names. And I've seen you teach, and I know you smile when you teach. You are absolutely not a mean teacher, and you're talking about being authentic, and like you let like your kind of just jovial self be exposed during a class, and the kids like feed off of that, and that just creates such a positive and constructive environment for your classes to like breed success.
Right.
And that's something that I watched you do when we taught together, and I wanted to get that from you too.
Yeah.
So okay, names. That's the one. Names.
Yeah. So we support your candidacy for middle school band director.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Put us down as references.
Yeah. Put your reference down there that you are on Chops episode number 25.
Yeah. Just link the URL in your resume to the show.
That's all you need. And I think we should do the interview. I think we should, like your next job, we do the interview on Chops.
We tear that up.
We roll up the local administrator and say, hey, let's go.
Yeah, mic check. Here we go.
Let's go.
No.
Yeah.
That's good.
And sorry, I was just gonna say, like just kind of going off the same idea. I've been doing these like middle school sectionals at one of the like Fort Worth schools, for percussionist, and it's like it's a tougher class, right? Like it's a tougher class, and I think every day like how certain teachers might teach that class, but kind of going off of the same lines, like the connection I build with the students allows me to be a better teacher, and I can't just teach those students. So like I've been doing things like we'll work for like 10 minutes, and then I can tell that like they're not having it, and then I'm like, all right, like a question of the day kind of thing. You know what I mean? And then we'll work for another 10 minutes or something. And then I'll be like, all right, like what kind of food do you like? And then we have a conversation, you know, to build those connections. Cause it's like those kids would not trust me coming in one day a week or something, you know, if I didn't have a conversation with them ever.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
I remember too, like, okay, I was not a part of your interview when you interviewed at Concord, but I remember like talking base with the other guys when they came out of that. And they're like, oh, yeah, this Denton guy, like, you know, something that he said that like struck us was that, you know, one of the questions we asked was, how do you work with classroom management? And I remember like Steve telling me this after you had interviewed, and your answer was, well, if the class is not being managed well, that's on the teacher. Like you have to change something up. And, you know, and this was like senior year of college, Denton, and your first response was like, it's not the kids, it's the teacher.
Right.
It's like, I got to change something up. And you're still the same Denton, you know, 5-6 years later, it's the same thing. I got to change this up. And that was a thing that, you know, caught their attention and said, Denton, we need this guy. But also just like, that's teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I really like it. There's almost no situation where the student should ever be blamed for anything. You know, it's like, the teacher's the one who's facilitating, you know, like they're the one with the control of the room, whether that's positive or negative or whatever it might be, you know? Right. So like, it's always got to be like, if something doesn't go right, like the first place you always have to look back to is yourself.
Right. That's excellent. Well, there's one final thing I wanted to tap into was, you know, there's a lot of, talk in the educational world about like self-care, you know, and teachers, level of anxiety and level of stress and just well-being, right? It's kind of like overstated, you know?
Sure.
But I think that you're a person, like your lifestyle, it seems like you've been able to, I'm sure it's that way at UNT. I'm sure you're going many different directions, teaching music, performing music, writing papers, teaching classes, you know, research or whatever. But you are finding time for Denton, the human, right?
Yeah.
And we've referred to it as like settling the snow globe, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of letting things kind of come down and not just running your life at 200 miles per hour with the foot on the pedal until you just crash the car. Like that's not sustainable. It's not very fair to yourself. It's not very fair to the people close to you. So it seems like that you've picked that lifestyle up from an early age. Can you speak to that about like what does I don't even think it's probably, I don't know like how you came across it, but I don't even think of self-care because it's kind of like who you are. But what does Denton outside the classroom look like that allows yourself to kind of recharge and, you know, more experience about who you are aside from music?
Sure. Oh man, that's a tough one. And I feel like I should like be really clear with this that like I do not live a perfectly balanced life like it sometimes may seem.
Okay, cut the tape. I told you this guy was not ready for this.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. It's hard. I am constantly like constantly like evaluating and you know and like being like okay, like what's going on.
Right.
And honestly, like being a student in school and teaching and like living life has honestly been a little bit harder. It was easier as a full-time teacher. Yeah, gosh, I think an awareness is the first thing that you have to have. Like it's just like you've got to be aware of of what you're doing And you also have to be willing to like put something aside to like do something else, right. Or like to take care of something else, or like, and it's always hard because like, especially in the teaching world, like teaching is always on our mind because like it's something we really care about, you know? And when it's something you really care about, like why wouldn't you want it to be on your mind? It can sometimes be the thought, but then sometimes it's like you've got to make space for other things and other times.
Right. So what is your activity? Like where does it happen for
right.
you?
Yeah. So like my getaway from like everything is just to be in the outdoors. And I love the outdoors. I love camping. I love hiking. Like just a couple weeks ago, I just like went to the national grasslands here in Texas, and I just like took my tent and my backpack and I walked 12 miles and I just like set up my tent and I camped for a night and then I walked back to the car. So yeah, I mean, that's just what I like doing, you know? And
but
I've got another trip planned when I get back. I'm coming up to Indiana to visit family for the break, obviously. And then once I get back to Texas, I'm going to go to the Guadalupe Mountain National Park, and I'm just going to like walk around and like be on top of a mountain and like kind of clear my head, and you know, and that's what does it for me. And you know, everybody, it's different. A lot of people, it's like sports or something, you know, or reading or whatever it might be. But for me, it's being in the outdoors. It's very just calming and relaxing, and
No, I think that's funny because Jack had mentioned, like, you know, what are you listening to when you're walking 12 miles? And you're like, nothing. Listen to yourself breathe and listening to the sounds of nature. But, you know, that, I know Jack has taken up the practice of running, and that's been like a awesome experience. You know, I like fall asleep on a chair. That's kind of like my experience. No, but that's great, though, I think, for to have not only a hobby, but something that kind of takes you so far away, like mentally and emotionally.
And that is far away.
Yeah.
And 6 miles out. And you don't even take you take your phone?
Yeah, I do. But a lot of times the places I take my phone, it doesn't even work.
Yeah.
He's off the grid. He is off the grid.
Off the grid.
So if you need Denton over the break, too bad. You can't get him.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Oh, man.
No, I think that's wise. That's like wise lifestyle choices. And, you know, the next time you come on the podcast, we could also talk about diet and about food prep, because I think Jack and Denton can share a lot of goodness.
Dude, we could do a spin-off podcast
Jack,
on meal prep.
We could.
Really, I mean, Jack has really upped his game on the food prep.
Yep.
I got new containers since you left.
I mean, some of those were getting pretty cracked and janky looking. And he's got a grill. You know,
oh man,
I bought a grill, dude.
So he's rolling in with, you know, flame broiled chicken and
so, that's good.
Between the two of you guys, you were masters of, you know, rolling out the good cuisine at lunchtime.
Oh yeah,
it was a good time. Haven't gotten into curry yet. Well, Denton, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy master's degree schedule at North Texas. And I mean that I know you just said like it's easier to be a full-time teacher than that, and I'm just going, oh God. So seriously, thank you for that, and I know our listeners will be appreciative of hearing your thoughts. So Denton did talk about the love of outdoors, and you do have we can plug your socials. That's what you do in the podcast.
I guess so. I guess so.
Go follow Denton Outdoors.
Yep.
So really though, thank you for your time and your thoughts, and this is Steve and I do this because it's good PD for us, and we always come out of these conversations enlightened, and today especially hearing everything you have to say is like incredibly refreshing.
Yeah.
So
thank you. I mean, honestly, it's nice to like conversations like these are what, you know, keep us going and like keep us interested.
Yeah,
so
for real.
It's good for me too, you know, and I've always wanted to be on a podcast. So that's good.
Check that box.
Check that off the list.
When you get your middle school band director gig, you know, we want to come down and clinic your band.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or clean your band room, whatever it is.
Whatever you need.
Whatever it is.
You got it.
Okay, we want to encourage our podcast listeners to make sure that you leave us a review and subscribe. And also check out our social media content on TikTok and on Instagram with what is it? It's
pod_chopscast.
It's chops_podcast. And then it's also on YouTube.
And we're live on YouTube now. It's good.
So it's good stuff.
And then one note for our listeners: this is the last episode this season. We made it through a full season, and we talked to the producers, and we talked to our editing team, and they're down to renew us for another season.
We're going to do another season that will take us to the end of school.
So if my math works out correctly, which most of the time it does, this episode you're listening to comes out on the 19th.
Yep.
And then Steve and I are going to take a couple weeks off and rejuvenate ourselves over Christmas break. And then the next episode you will hear will come out on January 9th, also a Tuesday. And that will be the first episode of Season 2.
Woo! Okay. Well, for Steve Peterson and for
Denton Sutherlin
and Jack Hinkle,
we're out of here.
See ya.